But hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for coming. Sorry, you can't see me. I can see everyone else though, so that's good. My name's Kate. I started my organic journey quite a long time ago now. I feel quite old. In my head, I'm still a new entrant, but I did the Soil Association horticultural apprenticeship 2008 to 2010 on a mixed farm in Swindon. And before that, I was working in publishing in a completely different life and field, and didn't really like working in an office, and had always grown a little bit of veg in the garden. We had tomatoes in grow bags on a flat roof in our first flat in Bath, and we've always had a few bits and bobs in pots. And I volunteered at some conservation charities, and a magazine I worked on in 2008 talked about this new apprenticeship that Soil Association had launched. So I thought that sounds interesting and much better than working in an office. So I tried to find somewhere that would host an apprentice for 2 years, and found this farm, the lovely Rowie at Purton House Organics near Swindon in Wiltshire, and worked there, well, officially for 2 years, but then carried on working part-time for another 7 after I finished, while I was setting up my own place, basically. So after the apprenticeship, I looked about for some grower jobs, and there just didn't really seem to be that many. And I didn't really feel confident enough to take on a head grower position somewhere, because I'd only been growing for 2 years. So I thought I'll set up my own small place somewhere. Managed to find a couple of places not too far away who were potentially interested in renting out a couple of acres. One of them was Hartley Farm near Bradford and Avon, and I went there, and they'd had launched a farm shop a couple of years before. Their previous farming background was pig farming, beef farming. They'd done a bit of everything, really. Fourth generation farmers, and they were looking for someone to grow some veg because they'd tried it a bit and didn't really know what they were doing, and they couldn't really quite make it work with all their other things that they had going. So they were looking for someone to come in and start their own business, and they'd help them, essentially. So give them a cheap rent, let them borrow tools and anything else they needed, that kind of thing, with the idea that they'd supply the farm shop and cafe. So yeah, I started in 2011, and then after a couple of years doing that, I'd been talking to other sort of new entrant growers, or people who were starting up businesses, who were like me, trying to find out how to start a business from scratch, because so many farming families and growers seem to come from farming backgrounds. So maybe they already had land, they already had connections, they'd got sort of family history in growing or farming. And if you didn't have that, and if you were a brand new entrant, it felt very difficult to really know where to start a business. So yeah, that's the rough background and the rough idea behind why I started the book, really. So I was sort of had lots of conversations with people about, I've registered with HMRC, I've done this, I've done that, and then I thought, really, I just need to put them all down and share it with everyone to see if other people would find it useful. So that's where the book that came out in 2013, that's the background to that, really. And hopefully a few people found that useful in 13 years. And the publisher was the publisher of that book that was published by Green Books. And then Bloomsbury bought Green Books and came to me and said, actually, we think this could do with, because it was, out of print at that point after sort of 10 years or so. So they said, we'd like to print this again, but have a revival, have a refresher. So what's my brain saying? Yeah, so they came to me and said, would you do an update? And obviously quite a lot had changed in the last 13 years. So I said, yes, I think that would be a really good idea. Quite a lot has changed. Yeah, and so that's that, and now the book's out. Exciting, and hopefully other people might also find it useful.
How long, I mean, the process of writing the book, when did you start, Kate? How long was that period? Because it usually it's probably I say when I did mine, it was probably at least a couple of years in sort of gestation sort of the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, so the original one, obviously I was sort of started the actual launch of, my market garden in the autumn of 2010. Um, had the first growing season, had the winter, and then I sort of thought at that point this would be all useful stuff for other people to have. So I started collecting information then, and I talked to Green Books in 2011 and said, you know, what do you think about this then? Basically. Um, and then the actual writing of the book took most of 2012, which was that lovely wet summer, if people can remember that. So that was that was fun. And then and then it was just all the edits and everything else, and it came out in October 2013. And then the newer version, um, obviously the base of it was written, but I went back through and I rewrote quite a lot of it and added quite a few new sections. So I remember going through and finding a section where I was talking about these really useful things called smartphones, how
Hmm.
useful they are to growers. So so there's quite a lot of sort of base level updating that was needed. We'd also run a crowdfunder campaign ourselves um, during that time as well in 2023, so I could put in a bit more about that. And I feel like in 2012 and 2013, crowdfunders were only really just about being used in they've been used in other industries like games and other things quite a bit before then, like Kickstarter. But I feel like farming and growers have over the last 10 years really used them, especially community based farms. So I put in some more detail about that. There was obviously a whole load of change about all around HMRC, HMRC, and uh, uh, how the subsidy system works. That's obviously changed, and it's changed again as of a couple of weeks ago. We've had the delightful news that you have to have 3 hectares to be eligible, having not had the threshold taken away, and now it's being put back in again. So yeah, things are sort of changing all the time, which is a bit of a pain. But redoing this one sort of just took about a year, and it was really an intense last 3 months because over the spring and summer I didn't get that much done. So it was mostly over the autumn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's um, I mean, it is quite an intense process, and it is I mean, amazing. And well, hats off to you for being able to do that and combine that um, with growing and family and the rest of it as well. So, yeah, um, that's that is that's quite impressive, and it's something that perhaps we can come on to into a bit later is the sort of the options that people have when starting off and part time and running it inside other um other ventures can be another sort of thing we can chat about. um so yeah, so we've sort of been talking a little bit about what my next question is what has changed between 2013 and 2026. And it is amazing when you talk about, smartphones, things that we just take for granted now that are such a integral part of our lives, and kind of the access to information on that we have, and the ability to benchmark and so on that you can do and access, find use apps to see what your pest is in real time through, and all those sorts of things which weren't available, even a couple of years ago, and now sort of very much on the, that power that we have at our fingertips through sort of the growing use of AI and stuff is quite interesting. Um, so yeah, perhaps then, maybe the next thing then before what we're going to do is just have, after Kate's introduced the book, then we're going to throw it open to sort of basically for questions for people. But if maybe Kate, if you want to just go through sort of chapter by chapter a little bit, and just and with some of the sort of the structure of the book and what's and what and the content of it.
Yeah, I was also just thinking about what's changed, and I know talked a bit about it in the newer introduction, but
Mm.
thinking back, 2013 feels an awfully long time ago now. um, you kind of think we've had Brexit since then, we've had COVID since then, plus even more extreme weather. So uh, even though on the one hand 13 years doesn't seem that long, I feel like I remember during the pandemic this time, 6 years ago, suddenly I couldn't grow enough salad, and people were demanding salad because all the supermarket shelves were bare. Um, so I feel like it's been highlighted a couple through Brexit and the pandemic on how reliant we are on, as a society, on just-in-time delivery. And I know there's probably some people in in the meeting here who've experienced, especially if they've been growing since 2000, those phone calls from customers saying, can I join your veg box? And suddenly you've got 100% uptake on customers, which on the one hand is great, but if you've not planted for them, you can't supply them. um but yeah, so that's just a couple of thoughts of how things might have changed a little bit in the last last however many years. um but yeah, in terms of the thoughts I had to put in the book, basically I started off with land because that's kind of often where we all start, isn't it? So um I thought it was quite important to look at different land options. So I put in a few ideas, such as, obviously, if you can buy land, then that's great. That's out of reach for a lot of people, especially if you're buying smaller plots. So, the official average for per acre for land is, depending on whereabouts you are in the country, something like 13 to 15,000 pounds an acre. But realistically, if you're trying to buy just an acre or a couple of acres, even if you're not in the south, which is obviously where the land's the most expensive, you'll be looking at sort of a bare minimum of probably 20,000 an acre, and probably more. So that often puts buying land out of reach for a lot of people. So then the next option is, being part of maybe a somewhere that already has land and is looking for a grower. So that's an option. But if you're driving it as somebody who wants to start their own business, then you're probably looking at renting, or at least to start off renting. And then obviously there's the route that I went down, which was approaching an individual farmer who had a farm shop already. And that's been quite a useful route for quite a few people. But there's also things like National Trust, huge landowner in the UK, and the Church of England. Quite a lot of random people own land. So it's often, we went through a stage of just literally posting letters through people's doors saying, would you have a couple of acres you'd like to sell us or like to rent to us? And then I've got some links in the book as well to the land registry for finding plots of land. So yeah, sort of for finding land is the sort of base starting point. But equally as important is finding a market. So you might find land that is affordable, or either rent or to buy. But if you're miles and miles away from the nearest village or town, it's going to be much harder to make that a viable business, because you need to either get people to you or you to people, which is doable, but it's obviously something to bear in mind. So finding a market is very important. um, I also just included a table of sort of basic level equipment for the first couple of years. And I sort of budgeted £10,000 for basic equipment. So that will be, polytunnels, a small rotavator, hand tools, that kind of thing, some basic packaging. And then once you've sort of got going, you can keep on buying more and more equipment. So I mentioned the crowdfunder. We ran a crowdfunder in 2023 to pay for a second-hand tractor. and managed to raise £10,000, which was great, in 6 weeks. So we now are the proud owners of a Fordson Dexter, and have been buying tools for that kind of ever since. So power harrow, we've now got a trailer, we have a small plough, and some tines, which are amazing, and a few other bits and bobs like a disc harrow, which we haven't quite got working yet, but we're sort of constantly adding to it. And then, as well as basic equipment, sort of linked to finding land, really, is raising the money. So it's raising the money, if not for buying land, then for just sorting out the initial equipment you'll need for those first couple of years, and just to get you going until the business is established, and you can break even at least, and hopefully make a small profit. So some ideas there for raising finance. Obviously, if you've got savings or you happen to have the money anyway, then you're away. But not many people are in that situation. So, like I say, there's quite a bit there about crowdfunding. There's also really good videos for offering advice for crowdfunder. And if you do something through Crowdfunder or BuzzBank or Indiegogo or that kind of thing, they also really want you to do well. So they'll help you run a successful campaign. And other ideas of funding, there's various charities. There sort of seems to be a dwindling amount of funds as the years go on, but there are still, especially if you're a charity or a community-based business, you'll be eligible for some of the charity funds. There's obviously the straightforward bank loans. You might want to go down the ethical bank loan or just a normal bank loan. So just a few sort of ideas there for funding. And then we start the really exciting stuff of paperwork, which is the really sexy business. So I've sort of broken that down into financial paperwork, and where to start with that, and the legal paperwork, and some of it's linked, obviously. So legal wise, that's about your business structure. So whether you want to be a sole trader, which is sort of the easiest thing to start with, at least, and you register with HMRC, and then you're away, basically. So you'll want insurance still. So basic insurance packages always have public liability on there anyway, and then you can add product liability. So just in case anyone chokes on your celery or anything like that. And you can also add employer liability. Even if you've got volunteers, that's what you'll need. You'll need to put employer liability on your insurance. But again, if you're a sole trader, that's sort of it. And then you just get going. And then if you want to go down the route of being a limited company or a CIC, which is sort of limited company plus, or a cooperative or a charity, then they're slightly more complicated structures, but all doable. So just some options, and partnerships as well. That's some options to keep in mind. And then sort of the financial things can make can make some growers kind of go cold. But again, a difference between now and 13 years ago is the software packages, where you've got Sage and Xero and QuickBooks designed to really help small business owners. So you don't have to be a qualified accountant to kind of work out how these things work. Obviously, it's useful to have an accountant, but you can do a lot of it yourself. And that just sort of helps with general bookkeeping, so you can keep an eye on what's coming in, what's going out. So another thing that's changing as of this year is pretty much everything will have to be digital from this year. If you've earned over a certain amount, if you've only just registered as self-employed, which you'll have to do with HMRC if you're a sole trader. You'll also, if you're a limited company, you also need to register with Companies House, and you also need to register as a director, so to be self-employed. So you'll have financial things to do, whatever. But what else was I going to say? Remember, because my brain's going the mention of HMRC's made my brain go off. Oh yes, so the you'll have to, everything has to be digital now basically. There was a time where you could just do it all on spreadsheets and then sort of use bridging software to upload them for things like VAT returns. So one thing I mentioned is that if you're a veg grower, it's definitely worth registering to be VAT registered, even though you don't have to if you're earning under £90,000 a year. But if you're a primary producer, you won't be charging VAT on what it is you're selling. So vegetables are zero rated, basically, anything edible. Flowers and non-edibles are quite often standard VAT rateable, so 20%. But generally, if you're not charging VAT on things, it means you can reclaim all the VAT. So if you're buying a lot of new things like polytunnels or equipment, it's often worth voluntarily registering for VAT so that you can claim it back, essentially. But yeah, so there's lots of paperwork that's probably sent everyone to sleep now. And there's just a little bit about, registering with your local council for environmental health and that kind of thing, which is normally just filling in a form which lives at your local council offices, and they file it somewhere and forget about it. But at least you've registered with them. And then I then look at a bit more interesting things about what to grow. So the idea is, if there's a lot of amazing books like yours, Phil, obviously, about what, and that, I wasn't obliged to say that. So there we go. This is true. But there are lots of good books about, what to grow and how to grow, veg-wise. So I don't really talk about how to grow, but more about what makes sense to grow business-wise. So again, it's sort of related to the finding your market. What is it that customers actually want you to grow? There's sort of no point growing 20 kilos of chilies if you're only going to sell 1 kilo. So, or you're going to struggle to find a market for the rest of it. So it's not like you must grow these things. It's more encouraging people to really work out what it is that they'll actually sell. And not only will they actually sell, will they be able to sell not at a loss, which is quite a difficult thing to work out. So in lots of industries, you work out how much something costs you to make, you work out what your overheads are, and then you work out your profit margin, and you pop it all in a calculator and you come out with a selling price. But it's quite difficult to do that with veg that's sitting in the ground for up to a year, and you're going to have to change what your input costs are depending on the year. So how much irrigation you put on it, how much labor it takes to weed it. 1 year is going to be different to another. So yeah, it's very difficult with veg, but there's just a few ideas of some things which can help get a rough idea. And at least if you've got a rough idea about what something's cost you to grow, and how much you've sort of sold it for in total, then hopefully you can roughly work out what things are more or less worth growing or not. But I know, I'm still growing aubergines, and for me, they're not really worth it, but I really want aubergines. So I still grow just a few aubergines, but at least I know not to go mad for them, because I won't sell them. For aubergines, the market that I sell to are less bothered about it being organic. So they'd much rather get really big ones from the Netherlands, than my sort of slightly smaller but more expensive ones. So it makes sense for me to concentrate on crops that will sort of have a better profit margin on them. So like I say, it's absolutely different for everybody. And it's always really interesting to look at what sells well for somebody and what makes money for other people. But generally for me, I would say it's on a normal year, it's kale, leeks and chard, followed by salad, and then depending on the year, tomatoes. But last year it was all a bit different because the leeks were terrible. It was so dry, they were very disappointing. And the kale struggled a bit as well, again, because it was so dry. The chard was okay, but actually the salad and the tomatoes, even though they're more labour intensive, so sometimes when you sell a product and you think, oh, I get a good price for this, but actually it's taking so much labour, it ends up not being as profitable as you might think it is. But But last year they did so well, they probably overtook my usual sort of staples. Anyways, yeah, so just some thoughts there. So it's all a very whistle stop tour. um, and then also just talk a bit about some marketing and selling ideas. So not just the usual. Oh, I've seen a question. Yeah, not just the usual kind of. Obviously, there's veg boxes, which is very common. Yeah, sorry, and I should have said I sell about 50% of what we grow to the farm shop and cafe where I rent the land. So I've got 2.5 acres that I rent, that I've rented since I started in 2011. And then in 2022, we managed to buy a similar size field just around the corner off somebody else. So now in total, we've got just under 5 acres. And we sell, like I say, 50% of what we produce to the farm shop and cafe on site. And then about 25% now, as of sort of the last 4 years, has been to direct veg box sales. And it's not a set veg box, it's a sort of from a list of what we have available. And then the rest of the 25% goes to other wholesale outlets. So for a small scale grower, we're a bit odd. So I think most small scale growers would sell a lot more direct. So I'm not at all very representative and wouldn't necessarily encourage people to follow the same model, but it just happens to work for us because of the markets that we have and also the way we like to grow. And we don't really do many markets, which we could do, but we don't really want to. I quite like having weekends. So, yeah, so say that, like I say, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it will suit different things will suit different people. Yeah, so as well as veg boxes, there's obviously restaurants can be a really good outlet, especially for things like salads or micro leaves, and farmers markets and other markets. We were having a chat at a growers cluster recently about sort of decking out a veg van or a trailer to sort of take like a library of veg round to places that wouldn't normally get veg. So there's lots of innovative ideas that OGA and other grower groups can share. So it's always worth seeing what other people are up to. There's public procurement. I know growers who sell to universities. The universities are often quite supportive of eco-friendly growing, that kind of thing. And yeah, just events as well. We had a polytunnel supper club last September that was really, really, really successful. So we'll be doing that again this year. And then, yeah, sort of looking ahead to challenges coming up. Obviously, number one is climate change, but other ones are potentially war. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But bearing all these things in mind, I couldn't have predicted Brexit or COVID back in 2013, so I have no idea what's going to happen. But I think growing veg for a living is very, very difficult to it's very, very difficult, full stop, and it's very difficult to make a really good living from it. I'd say it's absolutely fine to make part-time living from it, or a modest living from it, but if you want it to be a money spinner, you might be a bit disappointed. But if you can diversify and have other strings and other arms to the business, like events, like educational events, that kind of thing, then you'll be much more resilient and hopefully more financially resilient as well. And then what else have we got going on there? And then I've just popped in a calendar as well, just because that helps my brain. If I have a planner up in front of like a whole year planner, I can work out when tax is due, when VAT's due, when PAYE is due, when I have to plant things, when I have to sow things, that kind of thing. So, and then, I've just popped a big resources section in there as well, just for all the sort of funding ideas and landlord ideas, packaging companies, seed companies, hopefully a bit of everything in there. Yeah, I think that's a whistle stop tour.
Great. Well, take a breath, and I think it's interesting. I've just been one of my little jobs, which is working with agroecology. I've been looking at some of the recordings from some work they've done on a roadshow with the AHDB on sort of the resilient farm, and hearing Stephen Briggs talking about some of the some of the potential shocks to the system and things that we're going through at the moment, with with the war and the potential loss of fertilizers and so on for a lot of farmers, really sort of potentially just showing how vulnerable our food system is, and potentially putting growers in a much stronger position that but potentially. So that's all very, very interesting, but there's lots of aspects to resilience that we need, that the growers need to think about as well, within terms of their farm or their growing businesses. Okay, and at that point, I think just I would just say, if anyone's got any questions to Kate, we can just take it from there. And we've got a lot of experience on the call as well. We've got Jim. I see Jim Applin, who probably doesn't want to be put on the spot, and I won't put him on the spot, but he could if but he is here if there's either contribute to the chat or through or through any of the questions that we've got. We've got Pete and Louise Dollimore, who've also got loads of experience, so it doesn't have to be just Kate answering these. So yeah, here comes a question from Anna, which is, how did you get your land checked for its organic status, and was that tricky? How long does it have to be clean from pesticides before you can call the soil ready to produce organic food?
Ooh, sorry, my connection dropped out a bit there, but I think I got the gist of that. So I wasn't certified organic originally for a good few years. Actually, it took me I'd always planned to, but it took me quite a few years, and it was mostly because I was selling so locally. I kind of, in my head, couldn't justify the precious kind of £500-600 a year to get the logo. But then after about 5 or 6 years, I was also moving land plot around slightly. So I started off from one bit of the field and then moved to another bit. And so if I'd spent, it takes 2 years to be what's called in conversion, which means you're converting from conventional to organic. So if I'd spent those 2 years and the time and the money doing that, you can't call it organic until the end of the conversion process. And then I would have moved plot and then had to have done it all again because the grower isn't certified, it's the land that's certified. So anyway, I was sort of quite stable by, well, in terms of land. I don't know about other ways of being stable, but the land-wise, I was quite stable by I think 2018, and because of Brexit as well, I thought now's time to put my money where my mouth is, and actually go for conversion. And then I managed to apply for reduced conversion, which is 18 months. So it takes 6 months off the normal 2-year process. And that was because I could say, sign a document saying this farm, this land has been used for this purpose. And, and I know that I can sort of sign it to say it hasn't been sprayed with glyphosate or anything else for the last 6 months. It's just been down to whatever, if it's been down to pasture and nothing else, or cattle's grazed it or whatever else. So you can apply for reduced conversion. I'm certified with the Soil Association, but you can also certify with OF&G or Demeter. And I think there are 1 or 2 other certifiers, but they're the 3 main ones. So on average, it's 2 years, but you can potentially get reduced conversion. You can test your soil as well. So if you're going to a new site and you've no idea, what's been used there before, whether there was any, sort of heavy metals or anything being used, especially if you're in a city, you can just get a quite simple and fairly quick soil sample sent off to, a lot of people use NRM or K-Wood labs, but there's a few other ways of testing it. Yeah, I think, does that answer the question? I can't remember what the other part was now. Cool. But yeah, and the cost for certifying, I haven't got the technology handy to double check what my last invoice was, but it's basically about 500. The Soil Association anyway has a small grower fee, which is about £500 plus VAT a year. If you sell mixed things in a bag, so for us it's mixed salad leaves, stir fry leaves, mixed kales, you also have to have a producer license, which is £100 plus VAT a year from the Soil Association if you are not selling everything directly. So if you're selling everything yourself through your veg box scheme or an honesty stall or a market stall, you don't necessarily have to have a producer processor license. But if you're buying in anything for veg boxes, or you're, like I say, selling to a wholesaler, then you need a processor license, which is quite a pain. But there we go, extra expense and admin.
I'm just going to add something on a couple of things on the conversion. And one is that for Demeter, for the biodynamic certification, the Biodynamic Association certify organically, but they also certify biodynamically. So they can do the auditing for the organic certification, which is 2-year conversion, but it's an extra year to be converted to biodynamic growing. So that's one thing to bear in mind should people want to go down that route.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
And the other thing I was going to say is in terms of land and access to land. And one thing I did when I was part-time growing for a number of years, and I managed to piggyback my conversion, my organic conversion of a walled kitchen garden. I used to manage to piggyback that on the back of an organic shop who was certified. It was also on site. So if you manage to find the right combination of somewhere where an organic farmer who is sort of broadacre organic farmer who has some land that you may be able to, and a farm shop or whatever, you may be able to piggyback your certification onto that, which can be a big bonus.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the question there from JT, I think it is. Is that right? Where's the best place to get your book? Oh, that's a nice question.
OGA.
Yeah, OGA, yes, OGA and all good bookshops or online sellers. Secondly, what are you doing to make your gardens more resilient to aforementioned shocks and climate change? That's a very good question. I think, like a lot of things, diversity is probably key to resilience. So not relying on one or two crops, really. So we grow an awful lot. I'd say the only things we don't grow are onions for storing onions, although last year we grew red onions for storing and they were brilliant, so I'm doing that again. But white onions for storing we don't really do, just because they're so cheap. We do potatoes, which we sell mostly direct and don't do too many wholesale, but that's mostly because we now have a tractor and a potato harvester. So when we were having to dig everything by hand, it just we just couldn't make the numbers add up. So yeah, we grow a bit of everything apart from onions, and we don't grow masses of cabbages. We'd rather grow things like kale and purple sprouting that tend to make more per metre square for us. But obviously everyone's market is different, everyone's climate is different. If you've got ground that grows cabbages amazingly with a little effort, then you're away. But for us, climate-wise, I've tended to go down the more perennial route. So I found the last few springs in particular have either been absolutely soaking or bone dry, and both of which can make very difficult growing conditions for early crops. So the hungry gap can get, sort of that normally runs from end of March to June is even more pronounced. So we've sort of lent into perennials like red currants and black currants and white currants that are ready from the end of May to June, and they're brilliant and don't take a lot of effort, which is one of my favourite things. We've got asparagus coming into its third year this year, so it should actually be ready for picking this year. We grew it from seed, so that's another thing. Lots of herbs, perennial herbs, which is very good for, herb sales. We also last year just started doing fresh herb tea mixes. So basically, maybe 2 herbs in a bag. We did, or we are doing as well this spring, nettle and mint as a cleanse tea. And later on, we do a relaxed tea of chamomile, lavender and lemon balm, which is really nice. So yeah, lots of perennials. We've got more fruit trees in as well. That's very useful. And then in terms of other, sort of shocks, just having a diversity of outlets is really helpful as well, not relying on one customer or, only veg boxes or only one restaurant. I feel like spreading the risk is a good thing. And then the third question, did you see a change in sales from non-organic to organic? That's a good question. We did sell to Farm Drop, which some people might remember. It quite famously went bust the week before Christmas in 2022. We talked about it in the OG at the time, I think, early 2023. So they were an online platform, kind of a retail platform, and would buy direct from growers and either collect from them, or growers would deliver to them, and farmers, not just growers. They were like a whole online supermarket basically. And that was very, I think you had to be organic, although for that. So you might find that some outlets will only buy, especially if you're selling wholesale, will only buy organic produce. There's some shops as well that will only buy organic. So if you're selling further afield, then definitely, rather than just your own really local community where everyone can see how you're growing, then the label is really useful, because it just provides an answer to all those questions people might have about how you grow. And you can say, look, I'm organic. People have a much better idea about how you grow. So yeah, in terms of sales and diversity of sales, it does really help. But if you're starting really local and very small for the first couple of years, it wouldn't necessarily have to be very top of your list, but at the same time, places like your certifying body, like the Soil Association, do also offer lots of help as well. So there are lots of benefits to being certified. But yeah, hope that answers the question.
There's another question here. I don't know if you'll see.
Oh yeah.
Which is interesting question from Harold Liberty. Kate, you signed up to any government funding or support schemes, and if so, what's your experience with them?
Oh, that's a good question. Very topical. Yes, I am. So we are signed up for both a CS mid-tier subsidy scheme with the Rural Payments Authority, the RPA, which is like, that's the paying out bit of DEFRA, essentially, that you register with. And we are registered as horticultural conversion. So that was when our field was in conversion, when we took it on. And then organic horticulture. And that was we took that agreement on, officially, I think it was the 1st of January. The agreements always start for the mid-tier. And the first year was 2024. Yeah. And it expires the 31st of December this year. And this was during the period. So I sort of filled in all the forms and did everything in autumn 2023. And it all got accepted and everything. And then it started from the 1st of January. So yeah, once I found the forms not too bad. It was fine, sort of working out what's what. It helps if you can talk to someone who's done it, or some people who've done it. The Soil Association have been running more recently sort of webinars. They've been funded seminars and webinars and one-to-one calls to try and sort of help you choose which options you'd be eligible for or are worth looking at. But yeah, so with that scheme, you had to pick what was called a revenue option, which was a sort of basic agreement level. What have you got this agreement for? And mine was organic horticulture, which was 700 and something pounds a hectare, which is better than a poke in the eye. It basically covers your certification fees every year. And then you could add capital things on top of that. So we added on laying a hedge near a road. So that was like £13.50 a metre or something. So it wasn't lots of money. But, if it's something you're going to do anyway, then yeah, so that's the CS mid-tier. And then we also signed up for an SFI 25, 24.
Sorry about that. I think Kate's having an issue. I've just messaged her in case she can still grab her phone.
Okay. Let's see what we've got. Any other? We've got some points here from Jim. Got a point from Jim for organic certification costs. SFI payments make it cost neutral for horticulture at around 3-4 hectares, I think. And also, maybe Stephen, do you want to mention that you think you've got a webinar coming up on looking at the tackling the SFI
Yeah, so
26?
hi, Stephen Jacobs, OTA coordinator. We've been asked by various people, and actually at the AGM on the farm walk at Kirkstall, we were asked if we do an SFI webinar. So we're putting one together. So we'll have a grower there who's been through it, and probably a couple of other people. I've got my eye on you, Jim. Try and find an appropriate date. And to do that next month if we can, so that people can get ready. Because if you are over 3 hectares, then you will be eligible to apply from June when it opens.
Great, thanks, Stephen.
Anyway, so yeah, currently on the SFI we don't really have huge amounts, so it's not a massive revenue stream, but we've started off and been used to not having anything at all, so anything that we are eligible for we are quite grateful for. So yeah, it would be good if I'm sure Stephen will, like I say, separate webinar for that. So in total it's about 700 and something pounds for the CS mid-tier, which comes once a year. The SFI scheme is currently paid 4 times a year, and on that we have a nutrient budget option on there, so we sort of take a soil sample and then work out what we need to put back on there. Obviously that's a bit more aimed at conventional growers because we're just putting compost or manure or wood chip on there, but it's worth getting paid to do that and have that kind of analysis. And we put on a few other bits and bobs like maintaining hedgerows, low density in-field agroforestry with our fruit trees, that kind of thing. So it mounts up to a few sort of like £250 every 3 months, which again is well worth having. So it would be very helpful if that continues in the future, but it's all a bit TBC at the minute.
And have you looked at any of the capital grants and things that are available, or are they all too large scale, do you think?
So there's the what's it called, FETF fund. We've had a look at that and everything is all enormous and not really relevant. And I know whenever I've spoken to MPs and EFRA committee members, everything has to be new or ex-display, which is fine, but we don't really need an £80,000 seed harrow or anything else, so seed roller. So yeah, there's nothing in there, unfortunately, that's useful on our scale. But if you are bigger, there might be a couple of things. There's things like seed trays, automated seed tray fillers and things like that if you're of a certain scale, but smaller scale there's very little there.
And what about any of the sort of loans and things, interest-free loans that you are sort of around and available?
Yeah, so there's the Dean Organic Fund, which ORC ORC slash AHDB, are they HDB now? I've
No,
slightly lost that.
no, they're not. I can clarify
You
that
can
a
say
little
that
bit.
bit, yeah.
Yeah, basically the Dean Organic Fund was administered by the Organic Research Centre, or through the charity, which is the Progressive Farming Trust. But when ADAS, when ORC became part of ADAS, they're no longer a charity. So basically, the charity side is split off, and is still running as the Progressive Farming Trust. So it is being the Dean Organic Fund is going to be, there is going to be another call um for for applications coming soon, and that will be administered by the Progressive Farming Trust. At the moment, it still sits on the Organic Research Centre website, but that's sort of where it is at the moment while the transition takes place.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so I've been aware of it for a few years, and then I actually applied last year because we want to put in mains water in the new field, which doesn't have a water connection at the moment. So I applied for a loan last year for £10,000 to put that in, and was awarded it. Hooray! So there is an admin fee of I think it's £495 plus VAT. So if you're only applying for small amounts, then that will be maybe a bit high, because I think it's not a sort of percentage based admin fee. It's just the admin fee. So as long as you're applying for quite a chunk of money, then it sort of makes sense financially to go for that rather than a lower interest loan if it's just a small amount.
But there have been a few growers who have sort of gone through the Dean Organic Fund. If you look on the website, you can see some examples and case studies there of growers who and what they've applied for. It doesn't always say how much, but you get a flavour of what they've done. A question here from Fiona regarding finding land. Does the land registry show the overall boundaries of farms, or only show it field by field?
I'm pretty sure it's just you click on a field you're interested in, and it will tell you who owns it, and then if you pay £3, it will give you it will give you the postal details so that you can write them a letter and say, I like your field, can I rent it or buy it? But I don't think there is a way of sort of selecting a business or farm and seeing what the boundaries are. You'd have to sort of go through, sort of individually and find out where the limits of that are, which if you're paying £3 a time might be quite tricky.
I mean, I think it is, as far as I understand it, is going to become a bit easier in the future. I don't know when the timescale for that, if anyone knows about that, but that's sort of what I heard some news quite recently, that there is going to be opened up to and be a lot more easy to find out who owns the land.
Yeah, I think there was in Scotland. I don't know if there's any Scottish people on the call, but I think in Scotland there's a lot more energy behind that movement of A, finding out who owns it, and B, being able to use it or buy it if it's not being used. But anyway, like I say, I'm sort of beyond my experience levels there.
And I don't know whether it still exists, but it used to be possible to get through the government mapping programs of Magic, be able to find who, at least what areas were registered under things like the organic farming scheme and so on. So you could tell where the organic land was if you wanted to ask, find organic farmers to approach. But that's still possible.
Yeah. There's a question from Jimda there. We supported ourselves in early years of growing before we achieved viability through outside work, forestry, fruit picking, gardening, etc., and found it quite a struggle to balance time, work, etc. did you have to do this, and was it manageable? Yes, and just about. So, so when I first started up, I was still working at Purton House. So that first year, I think, was I doing? I can't remember if I was doing 2 days. I think I was doing 2 or 3 days, and then have gradually whittled it back down to doing fewer days at Purton House, and ended up just doing 1 day for quite a few years. And then I stopped altogether in 2017 when I had my son. And then had just concentrated on my market garden since then. But I also, part of the reason at the end was I didn't really want to leave, because I really liked it there and we were friends. And actually, I found it very beneficial to do something else 1 day a week. And talk to another grower and see what they're doing. So it wasn't necessarily just the financial thing. Certainly in the first couple of years, then yes, working somewhere else part-time, and only working part-time while I was setting up. But I know a lot of businesses since then who have gone down the funding route, crowdfunder or otherwise, got the good chunk of money up front, and just gone for it much earlier on, rather than my approach, which was just sort of doing little by little. So I think it just depends on your circumstances, your approach, your confidence. But both ways are manageable, and hopefully people can find a way that suits them.
And did you think about or consider the sort of going down the sort of CSA route at all?
Yeah, a few people have asked me recently. So again, when I first started, that I knew of CSAs, especially one in Stroud, and the community farm in Bristol had just about started as well, similar sort of time to me. But there's an awful lot more now, which is great. But I think the trouble is, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and on a smaller scale, like the scale that I'm on, I felt like, I don't know, I like people. I do like people, but I think sometimes you have to be quite fortunate in a committee that everyone works together really well, and that you don't spend a lot of your time just managing the committee rather than actually doing the work. And I just wanted to get on and do it. So I'm not going to say never. Maybe it will change at some point, and I'll say, right, let's become a CIC or a CSA or whatever. But at the moment, I'm quite sort of happy plodding on and being the boss.
Yeah, I don't think it is for everyone necessarily, and there are sort of pros and cons in terms of that, and there are also different models of CSAs which give more sort of more power or control to the grower that isn't sort of growing by committee, which was always, I must admit, what terrified me about the thought of a CSA. But
Yeah,
I don't think it has to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, it can work. Like I say, it can work. I know plenty of places where it works really, really well, and everyone's really happy. But I think it just depends on you, and it depends also on your community and how involved people are or want to be.
Yeah. So another question, JT, does anyone mix animals into their market garden enterprise, or know of any examples, case studies? Lots of people do, but yeah.
I mean, there's I suppose when you say mix, I wonder if you mean actually in the garden, or just sort of in parallel to there's again places where I did my apprenticeship, Purton House Organics, where he has laying hens, and she also has a suckler beef herd. But they're not, they're in their separate fields. But obviously she uses the chicken muck in the polytunnels, which is great. It's like rocket fuel, which is really good. And I remember when I was doing my apprenticeship and we went, to look at various places, there was somewhere in Sussex, Pete and Louise might know where it is. I can't remember their name, but there was an orchard, relatively new orchard down there, commercial orchard. And there was a separate couple who were running chickens there as a separate business, but sort of, obviously very complementary. And they would sort of start off in the plum lanes. Everything was all kind of fenced in. And then as the plums started to get ripe, they were moved on to the apples and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think, and there's Jane at Oxton's who has sheep, I think. Jim will know. And that works pretty well. So, yeah, I think depending on what you want to do, again, it's diversity, isn't it? Diversity can be really helpful, but I suppose a word of warning is if it's you doing all of the things, it can be an extra thing to have in your brain. And there's already so much when you're running a business anyway, especially if you're doing veg, because there's so many different types of veg. That, yeah, I think, yeah, it's just something to be aware of. That might be the missing piece for some people, but it might be a bit too much for others, and they might prefer it if someone else comes in and has it as their own enterprise, but that's complementary.
I mean, that can be a benefit from being part of a larger farm that might have livestock, and that can be sort of used complementary within the system, sort of cleaning up after brassicas with sheep or whatever it is. And I think an interesting example, which if anyone's just received the new rotations guide that went out with the last organic grower, the example of David Newman, which interviewing him about his rotations, and they basically have that they rotate their market garden around a lot, basically a big field of grass, and then somebody else comes in and grazes the sheep, and so they have all that sort of kind of headache of managing those. I mean, unless they get out, then it's their headache too. But they have someone else to do that, and that's their business, and they're quite complementary. So yeah.
Question from David. As part of diversification and resilience, I'm interested in incorporating mushroom growing within our business. Do any of you have any experience of how this works with Soil Association accreditation, or know of anyone who's done this? I know a couple of mushroom growers, but they tend to now just be doing mushroom growing. I'm pretty sure lots of other growers have dabbled with mushrooms. Do you know of anyone who's sort of doing it a bit more than a bit on the side, Phil?
Well, I remember we had an article in the Organic Grower about, I don't know, they're still doing it, but Canalside, at one point they had a CSA in Warwickshire, and they had a kind of side business, or Tom Ingle had this side business of shiitake logs, and had a sort of quite a good system set up with logs which are impregnated with shiitake, and then they would shock them at a certain when he wanted a crop, and then they sort of went into the CSA shares. I got a feeling that he stopped it because he had problems with his back, but because it is really quite hard work with large logs on big A-frames, and I think that was one issue he had with it. But I mean, I think there's so much potential out there, but I suppose it's finding that balance, and what works with enterprises that fit in with the workload and balance of veg growing, I guess.
Yeah, the growers that I can think of, there's Arcadia Organics near Bristol, and Phelim used to do a lot of veg and then stopped, and now he specialises just in mushrooms. And we went to his place, and it's amazing, and it's all grown on I think it's mostly beech shavings, but in bags, and it's all very, just the management is so different, like keeping everything sterile and everything else. So in terms of accreditation, I'm sure it's all doable. I don't know. Wouldn't have thought you'd have to, pay for a separate license or anything. But I've always found that the certification department at the Soil Association are always really helpful. So if they've got a specific question, I'm sure you could just drop them an email and they'd be able to answer it for you, or find someone who can help.
and the standards, mushroom standards, I mean, they're all the Soil Association and other sort of the other sort of certification bodies have their standards online, and you can download them, and they have the detailed standards for mushroom growing are in there. I mean, they tend to be sort of related much more towards kind of maybe large scale production of cap mushroom, brown cap, and normal mushrooms than perhaps the some of the more sort of wackier things out there, which are kind of have all sorts of different cultivation techniques and mediums. But,
yeah, thank you.
So have we got any more questions? I can go to some of my questions that I had in case people didn't respond. But yeah, I was going to ask you what your top advice would be you would give your younger self that you have learned now that you didn't know then when you started out.
Well, I won't say don't do it because that's not true. What is my top advice? Just, I mean, at the time, I can remember saying to people like, just do it. So kind of sometimes knowing lots doesn't always really help. So just sort of just keep trundling on, and you can adapt as you go. Things will change every single year, and the business now is quite different to the business then. The site now is quite different to the business then. My customers now are quite different. I was selling quite a lot to restaurants in Bath, and then realised that actually the time taken to drive to Bath for £15 orders didn't really make a lot of sense. But especially when you start out, you just want to go and get the sale and do everything, and you don't know at the start who's going to end up being a really good customer and who isn't. So I think also have confidence in what you're doing, which is easy to say, isn't it, with hindsight? But when you're starting out, I can remember somebody once, well, in fact, I've been asked a few times, oh, do you grow bananas? Do you grow pineapples? And especially early on, my response was, oh, no, I don't. And, the back of my mind was, perhaps I should. And then, hang on a minute, I can't. And so that kind of idea that the customer is always right is like, up to a point they are. They also quite often don't really know that much about seasonal food. As growers, we all know about Hungry Gap and what's in season and what isn't. But we weren't born knowing that. We've just come to know that through growing and doing things. So why should customers, unless they're keen gardeners or especially interested in seasonal food, why would they know that you can't really get many tomatoes in February, especially if they see them in the supermarket? Because that's where they're getting their information from most of the time. So you can sort of forgive customers, but not necessarily feel like they know more than you, because they might not.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, one thing I'll add, because sort of from my sort of long experience of growing and part-time growing is kind of just remember starting off very sort of with huge amounts of enthusiasm and kind of and just wanting to do it, wanting to grow, and not and not really being interested particularly in terms of in terms of money and thinking about the future, and kind of and just realizing sort of how quickly a career goes by, how the years just go by so quickly, and some of the boring stuff like just thinking about pensions and stuff when you're younger would be what I would have advise my younger self to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I keep telling myself that I need to get a pension. I'm doing I'm doing savings instead and investing in machinery, and so I can sell the machinery as my pension.
Yeah, one grower had forgotten his name in Wales. Used to
Mm.
he his pension scheme was planting Christmas trees, and he would
Oh yeah,
he was doing that sort of, sort of when he was coming up to retirement, and so that's what he was going to live off of his holding when he didn't want to um go out there and do as much veg anymore. But,
yeah. We have thought about Christmas trees in the new field actually, because there is some space.
and other I guess other sort of aspects of agroforestry also can provide sort of incomes later on that you might not
Yeah,
might think about.
yeah. No, we'll all be working when we're 80 anyway, our generation, I think, won't
Yeah,
we?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Um,
Um, okay, and in terms of things like things have changed for you personally over the last sort of over the years since you started, and in terms of family and balancing. How do you manage to balance sort of running a business with, how do you keep with all the other
mm,
demands on your time, and
interesting.
keeping a work-life balance and not burning out and all the rest of it?
Well, I know, we've talked quite a lot over the last couple of years about burnout, and how prevalent it is amongst growers, especially I think newer growers, because of, like you say, you kind of throw yourself in when you've got loads of energy, and at some point, the energy is finite. So it is a tricky one. I'm sure if you spoke to my other half, he'd say that I don't balance it, but I don't know that, just too much work, too much going on. But I would say that generally, I do value weekends, and I do try and have weekends off. So we've got battery powered timers to do the watering in the tunnels. We will have to go in and open doors at this time of year, but in the winter when you can keep doors shut, or in the summer when doors can stay open, all day and all night, then you can actually have days off and not be there. And I think that's really, really valuable, um, just to keep you sane and to uh, at least just skirt around burnout, constantly orbiting burnout, but hopefully never actually falling right in the middle of it. Um, so yeah, I think time off, and if you're doing markets at weekends, then time off in the week. Then don't sort of fall into the easy trap of, there's always something else to do, always, and it's about prioritizing and what has to happen today, what can wait, further than tomorrow or whenever. And just trying to hit the really important things of what has to happen right now, otherwise everything goes wrong.
Thank you. Got a question coming from David.
Yeah.
So, can you give us some advice on approaching potential customers such as shops and restaurants? We are starting late on a field scale for the first time in a new area, and would like to approach these types of customers, but we have nothing to show or sell at this moment in time. Um, do do we say we will have something to sell you and it will be amazing, or do we wait until we have everything available, and risk not being able to sell everything we produce because we didn't start trying to sell soon enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a difficult one.
Mm.
I I would say you can do either, but I would say probably do both. So um, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting people know right now who you are, what you're doing, what you're planning. If you can talk to them now, then they're sort of come along with you on your journey, perhaps. And they might also be able to say, "Oh, we that would be interesting. I tell you what, we'd be really interested in lots of whatever it is. Like what we really need is lots of leeks. That's the thing that we really want." Um, so they might feel like, even if you don't listen to them, they might not know that. So they might feel like they have a bit of a stake. So I would definitely at least reach out to them and um, sort of, maybe invite them to come and have a look round, or a chat. But then when it comes to actual hard selling, then sending out availability lists of what you're going to have, you know, on our list that we send out, which are just a basic spreadsheet. We send out what's available, in the coming week, and then below that we have coming soon. So, in the next couple of weeks or next month, we'll have, tomatoes in whatever, and that will just help, especially I think restaurants, because they plan their menus quite far in advance. So even if you sort of catch them when they're changing from spring to summer menu or summer to autumn or whatever it is, I would definitely talk to them sooner rather than later, and then take them sample boxes of what you have, and then hopefully, if you can get to the right person, they'll then order. But again, if you just wait until you actually have something, it might be a bit late, and they might say, "Oh, we're tied in now to a certain contract," or, "Oh, I wish you told us that X number of weeks ago." So yeah, if you can, I would find some nice generic pictures of what your veg will look like, just to sell them the idea, and get in touch and just get some sort of conversations going sooner rather than later.
And I hear and read quite a lot of stuff about how the huge benefits of just getting your buyers, getting your chefs, getting the shops. If you can just get them onto farm and then have that conversation on farm, and they can see and they have then get such a different perspective of what it is to be a grower, and to make those connections. And I think that's really, really valuable if you can do it.
Yeah, definitely. We sold to one restaurant in Bath, Michelin starred restaurant, and the chef there was amazing, and he brought his entire team out to the farm to kind of semi-educate them, because there was quite a lot of fairly recent school leavers and a few sort of early 20-somethings who maybe hadn't had much experience at all of it being on any kind of farm or actual veg area. So that was really, really helpful, and you could kind of see them going, "Oh, we could use this, we could make a pesto out of this," and they'll come up with ideas which they probably wouldn't have just looking at a spreadsheet of what you've got.
Yeah. Well, thank you for Kate. Thanks for that, Kate. We're coming towards the end now, so I would just say it's a shame you can't. I haven't got your book because it's not available in Germany yet, and and you haven't got a screen, so you can't show it.
One. I'm just I'm a international woman of mystery with my black screen, so I'm very sorry, everybody. Technology has let me down.
Is Stephen still on the call? And I don't know whether he's got a book. Or
I am. I was just going to put the link in.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
So, but yeah, so is it now? It is available on the OGA shop as we speak. Yeah, brilliant.
We took delivery. We sold one at the AGM. I posted one, and I think I've got one due to go out.
Oh, exciting!
Rushed off my feet.
Yeah, all these exciting projects that are starting.
And while you're there, you can also buy this one. So
yeah.
It's disappearing into the background as I am. I don't know where it's gone. There we
are. I'll put a link in for that one as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you, guys.
Well, I have to say, apologise for some of the technical glitches we've had on this call, and it's a shame we haven't been able to see you, Kate. But thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone has found it a valuable exercise. And the OGA is here for you if you're to help you on that journey. So start off with buying Kate's book, and then subscribe to the Organic Grower, and ask questions on the forum, or come to events and come and join other webinars and so on. And good luck and happy growing.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Sorry again for the black screen.
Thanks all.
Cheers, Kate. Thanks.
See you all soon.
Yeah.